Hello and welcome to Bodyholic with D, episode number 18. My name is D. Katz Shachar and I am a public health promoter. This podcast is a part of my effort and mission as a public health professional because I believe that real science-based information and knowledge is power, and my job in this life is to empower you. I want you to have high and sustained energy throughout the day, and I want you to feel better than you've ever felt before, during, and after your workouts, in and out of your clothing, and not only physically, but mentally and emotionally as well. Today's guest is the daughter of an international lawyer and high-powered Kenyan diplomat. Dr. Noreen Nguru spent her childhood traveling the globe. She attributes her avid passion for travel to being a global citizen during those formative years. After graduating medical school and chartering a dynamic portfolio career, she gained accreditations as a cognitive behavior life coach and wellness travel consultant. And combining these unique skills and creating a unique skill set, in 2022, she officially launched What the Doctor Recommends, the world's first doctor-led travel consultancy prescribing wellness travel to reduce the rising rates of stress and burnout in the global workforce. As a recent recipient of the Outstanding Leadership Award in 2022 and shortlisted finalist at the TTG Luxury Travel Awards in 2023, Dr. Nguru is widely regarded as one of the world's foremost advocates for workplace well-being and the emerging therapeutic benefits of travel for holistic well-being. Now, before we begin, I want to give you a quick heads up. The YouTube version has delays on my part of the video. Luckily, Dr. Nguru came through loud and clear and the audio was great. So I want you to kick back and enjoy this very delightful and very insightful discussion. Hello, Dr. Noreen Nguru. Did I say that right?
Yes. Hi.
I'm so excited. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing really well. It's quite early here in the UK, but loving life, sunny day, can't complain.
Beautiful. And also thank you so much for being here with me, especially at this early hour. I really appreciate your presence.
Absolute pleasure. No worries. Thank you for inviting me on. I'm very excited to be on the podcast. I have listened to a few episodes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. The reason I have you on is because you are, first of all, very knowledgeable. The way you articulate yourself when you speak is always so clear, so impressive. And you are also really the expert on work-life balance, on overall well-being and how to avoid burnout. And this is something that I'm very interested in regarding the podcast as well. It's something that my listeners are very interested in. So I'm really happy you're joining.
Thank you for that lovely compliment.
And I wanted to start off, and maybe you want to give a little bit of an introduction as well, but I think maybe how did the work-life balance concept evolve over time? And then you can kind of give maybe a little bit of an introduction, but we know it today as something very popular,
Right.
But it wasn't, people didn't hear about it, I think even 10 years ago. Am I correct?
I think that in general, as a Western society, once we had the kind of Industrial Revolution, and we had more people going into the workplace in various industries, there's always been almost a drive from the top, if you look at corporations, to get more bang for their buck. So, more productivity and really pushing to get the bottom line up. And I think that's always translated down to the average employee to do more, be more, show up more. And I think 70s, 80s, 90s, even the noughties, it was really just the done thing, that if you wanted to really progress in your career, that you're going to put in the hours. It's just a thing. And I think especially in the US, I see this. And just in societies like the UK, where you've got employees working for mega kind of conglomerates that are really after to pinch every bit of productivity and essentially money that they can get from their employees. Yeah. But I think there's almost been a reckoning in the last, let's say decade, but it's been happening before, that actually employees are not donkeys. There's a limit to the resiliency that one can have in a workplace. And that resiliency shouldn't be on the employee to be pushed to their maximum output, their maximum productivity, because employees are not robots. They need that rebounding time to rest. And that is actually what boosts productivity, is having a well-rounded, rested workforce. But I definitely think we've started to hear more about work-life balance and the implications of overworking in the last decade, especially I now think post-pandemic. There's definitely a reckoning about trying to achieve that kind of optimum health and well-being in the workplace, and then also in other areas of life.
Right. And also, why do you think that post-pandemic it's become more of an issue? Is it because the lines have been blurred, like work came home kind of?
Yes, I think. And we've had the rise of the pandemic entrepreneur. We have more people than ever who are either part-time or self-employed, have started side hustles and businesses. I definitely think having side hustles has also kind of mixed that line, because people aren't necessarily switching off, being like, oh, 9 to 5 and I'm off work now. It's like 9 to 5 and then 5 to 9, I'm now going to be focusing on my side gig, because we're in an economy, a cost of living crisis, and people are looking at other avenues to kind of supplement their pay, basically. But then also, yes, kind of being at home and not having the clear zeitgeists or the clear signals that I've left work, shut the door, I'm getting on transport, like public transport or in my car, having that time to debrief, getting home and switching off. It was hard to do before, but definitely working from home has made things a lot worse. And that's been recognized in a lot of research and statistics.
This is very interesting. So in terms of the struggle, what you're saying is people are also, the lines are being blurred because there isn't the actual transition from the workplace to home. There is also the issue of the entrepreneur. That's really interesting. The fact that people started cultivating their interests into a profession during the pandemic, or something like, and you also mentioned the economic situation where people feel like they have to work, or even if they're good right now, the insecurity, the lack of confidence for the future. It's like we've got to, rake it in or bring it in.
Something and have multiple streams of income and have a side hustle. A side hustle culture is we've turned everything, as a Western society, we've turned everything that we do, all of our hobbies, into money-making schemes. To be honest, I've fallen prey to this as well. If I knit something, I'm like, maybe I can sell it on Etsy, maybe I can produce more, but I have to stop myself and be like, no, you're doing this for leisure. It's not about being perfect and monetizing it. Even if you are good at something, it's about having that off time and just enjoying the thing that you're doing, not necessarily turning a revenue. But it's very difficult when we're in a cost of living crisis and, maybe a recession is looming and people are trying to nest egg. And we saw the uncertainty that happened in the pandemic. We've had all the big tech companies laying off probably people who thought they would be secure in their jobs until retirement. So everyone is on edge. Employees are sort of like, right, how can I, in this economy where the employer is sort of freezing pay, we're not having pay rises. How else can I supplement my income? And for most people, the only alternative is to kind of trade in your resting hours to be more productive. That kind of 5 to 9 entrepreneur thing.
I have to pause for a second and ask you to tell me about the knitting. So is this one of your hobbies where you're kind of decompressing? Is that what it is?
It is, yes, exactly. So sort of after the kind of pandemic, I really took it upon myself to have really distinct creative hobbies, and also monotask, because I am definitely someone who's prone to multitasking. It's not easy for me to have off time that I'm not like, potentially I should be doing something a bit more productive. It's just one of my personality traits. So I've really had to contend with myself and find activities that, so I do a lot of painting. I live by the sea. So I'll go for yoga, I'll do a bit of painting. So, and my knitting, I make scarves. I'm trying to progress onto mittens. I'm hoping that comes around in time
I love that.
Exactly. But yeah, it's just something to keep the hands. I listen to a podcast and I will not have any visual stimuli, but I'll just be knitting. And then it's a fantastic way to just let the brain wander, think, but also not feel that, because I don't know how people sit there and do nothing. I think that's very difficult. So having something to do with the hands is really great for me.
Yeah, it's like your version of meditating. Absolutely.
Yes, I meditate as well, but it's a great little hobby.
Yeah, I love that. And it definitely, even if it's not like meditating and sitting still, it's still the repetitiveness but you also have to focus, brings you into such a mindful space. And really, like, this is your designated time to knit.
Exactly.
And that's it. Yeah, I love that. So, the common signs for an imbalance between work and life, I'm really interested in that because there's nothing we can really do about the fact that our culture is changing, right? I mean, this is what's happening. It's not that the experts are going to come and say 9 to 5 and then let it go and enjoy life. People are now going. Technology is changing the way we approach work-life balance. So, what would be a sign, or even like how would we diagnose the situation of a work-life imbalance that perhaps can lead to, I guess, burnout?
I think that it's sort of multifactorial, but you've got things like, as I said, letting work bleed into the rest of your life, and it can probably do it in quite insidious ways. It's why burnout can be quite tricky um to differentiate, I suppose, the starts of burnout from just being chronically stressed in the workplace. You'll probably find yourself, if you have got an imbalance between work and the rest of your life, shunning socializing because you want to fit in just a couple more emails, or you want to just get this project done and then you will. It's almost like and then I will situation. And once I get this done, and probably coming home and finding yourself almost being like, right, let me just catch up on a few emails. Let me just take what I probably should have been able to fit into the work day, do a little bit at home, and not thinking too much of, an hour, maybe 2 hours. But then over time, you've got a lot of this compounding because you're not having adequate downtime. You're not down regulating your nervous system and really switching off from that constantly being on mindset. And I think another common sign I see a lot now is sleep disturbances, where it's just very difficult not to almost have that Monday vibe every day where you're sort of like, it's a Sunday and you're thinking about, okay, I've got work tomorrow and what am I going to do? And I've got this to do and blah, blah, blah. I know this is coming up, this project. And you find your sleep disturbed. You're having that every single night. And almost that anxiety. So these can be sort of common signs that there's an imbalance between your work and your life.
That leads me to really getting into the physical and mental health aspect. And are there signs where we can actually identify the impact of it? And you already mentioned the nervous system and sleep deprivation, and then we can also get into the areas where we need to make changes. But I'm very interested in us talking about the nervous system and sleep deprivation and any other physical and mental health signs that might arise.
Sure thing. I mean, when you think about stress, it is literally your nervous system being heightened or hyper aware. And the phenomenon that's causing this is work. When we're thinking about burnout, it's the demands of work, it's the working environment, it can be other factors like not having autonomy over your work or having too many responsibilities, just anything that's making you feel overwhelmed at work. And that overwhelm is translating into your nervous system being heightened. So evidently with that, you would get the physical symptoms, things like heart palpitations. You probably would get a lot of muscular tensions. A lot of work stress is linked directly with neck and back pain, because when we are tense, naturally, if you've got a predator coming at you, you kind of tense up. And subconsciously or consciously, a lot of us is sort of there, like, trying to get work done. So that can translate. I've mentioned the sleep disturbances, the insomnia, and even translating down to gastrointestinal issues, whether it's diarrhea or constipation. Some people might even suffer with flare-ups of things like eczema that they've not had before. And then just general fatigue, that physical and very much mental tiredness, where it doesn't necessarily matter how much you're sleeping, you just feel weary and worn out. And that's because the nervous system is so primed and you've got so many stress hormones like cortisol flying around. And part of the reason why we need to have separation between work and life, specifically the life part, is to down-regulate our nervous systems and find ways, whether it's through physical activity, exercising, and just ways to complete the stress cycle, meaning that you're kind of working off these chronically elevated levels of cortisol and other stress hormones that you have in the body. So the more that you're focusing on working, the less time that you have to recuperate. And these, all just transpire in a whole host of physical and mental health symptoms.
It's very similar to working out. It's like if you just keep lifting, or keep running and running and running, and you don't have the recovery time, which in my opinion is more important than the actual training, because that's where the benefit of the training actually happens. That's
right,
where the
muscle repair.
Exactly. So it sounds actually very similar, and people need to, I feel, really understand the consequence on the nervous system, that just like the muscle, the nervous system.
Being primed and ready all the time, because we are not meant to live in a constant fight, flight, or freeze system. We're just not. Our ancestors, even back in the day, they'd encounter a stressor, whether it's a saber-toothed tiger or whatever. Yes, they have that moment, maybe it's an hour running away from something that's charging from you, and then you're off again. But we're now constantly, and our our primitive brain, the amygdala, the side of us that is responsible for these sort of stress responses, doesn't differentiate between a physical stressor, whether it's work. It just knows something is making you feel stressed, so it's just going to keep producing stress hormones to try and get you through the period in time. But when the period of time is prolonged, that's when you get into burnout, because burnout literally is the complete depletion of your physical, emotional, and sort of psychological reserves.
And this, I have a, I guess, two-part question, because part of it, everything you've been saying and talking to you also makes me want to ask you a personal question. And of course you can ignore it, which is totally fine. But also, there is what I'm interested in are there personality traits? Because you and I have spoken about this, and you actually said that there is a predisposition that has a higher risk of burnout, if I understood that correctly.
Yeah, no, 100%. So we and I fall into this category, and it's quite interesting because certain personality traits tend to gravitate towards certain professions. And then it's interesting to see that those professions, let's say the caring professions or education, law, those sorts of things, like the less creative professions, they tend to have the higher rates of, employees having mental health symptoms, employees experiencing burnout, and even higher suicide rates. So the biggest kind of personality type, if we're talking about types, would be a type A personality, which is a very kind of driven, ambitious, and achievement orientated type of personality. Also quite conscientious, enjoys autonomy, being in control, and is kind of like very much on. Whereas if you compare that to a type B personality, which is a bit more creative, still achievement orientated, but in quite a different way, and not so linear, and happy to accept sort of failures and setbacks, as opposed to type A personalities, which can lend themselves to being a little bit more rigid thinking, perfectionist, and all of those things, especially when it comes to putting work as the focus, can lead to workaholism. And that's where you sort of start to see people not necessarily recognizing that even if it's a job that you're doing that you absolutely love, that you need downtime, and you need to really regulate the way that you're working. You can't constantly be switched on.
I'm curious, because originally you are a doctor, but were you practicing general medicine?
I was, yeah. So I would be, let's say I did residency, but I didn't complete my residency because at the time I think I definitely recognized that I was heading towards a path of burnout, and then I did develop burnout during the pandemic. And then I realized that for my mental health and well-being, that actually practicing clinical, so there's other reasons for that, practicing clinical medicine wasn't necessarily in my best interest. So now I'm sort of running my own business, my own boss, self-employed. So I've got that flexibility to be able to arrange my work schedule around my energy. And I think that's what I advocate to a lot of my clients that I work with, at What the Doctor Recommends, is to look at your day in terms of energy, rather than this is a total amount of hours that I have to cram. It's assess your energy. Either this is, this is how I'm feeling at the start of the week. This is, and also look at it kind of in a diurnal phase, where do I function better during the afternoon or during the morning? And then try and allocate tasks that are more difficult towards times where you feel more energetic, rather than just working in a linear way that everyone else works. It's having these little nuances that help you make work for you, rather than working for work.
And that means that you recommend, if I understand correctly, taking time to get to know yourself
Mm.
and your innate cycles, and then make it work for you.
Exactly, yes. And it can be difficult. I completely recognize when you're in a traditional working environment. And this is where I feel it needs to be more commonplace to advocate in the workplace for what you need. And it doesn't necessarily need to be that you've got a specific disability, but just being able to stand up for yourself and almost push back and say, I know that if I do X, Y, and Z, it is detrimental for me, but I'm a much more productive and hyper loyal, hyper focused employee if I do X, Y, and Z, and I'm still going to get the amount of work done, but I need to move at this pace.
Yeah. And even now, people are realizing that children, especially teenagers, because of the cycle, the natural cycle a teenager goes through, it's very hard for them to function in the morning, but they still have to show up at, I don't know, 8 a.m. And then teachers get upset because they're bored and they're falling asleep, and they're just not showing up to class because they slept through the alarm. And then it really begs the question of, like, how can we look at the in that case student, but can we look at the employee? And if you're self-employed, look at yourself, identify where you rise and fall. And because we naturally rise and fall throughout the day.
Exactly.
And
yeah, we have our
yeah.
energy peaks. Sorry, Kat, carry on.
No, you absolutely.
Yeah, we have our energy peaks on our energy troughs, and I think it's also important to realize that the 9 to 5 working day is very much centered on men, because they have a 24-hour body clock. Well, not a body clock, they have a 24-hour kind of hormonal clock. Whereas if you think about women, we typically run on a 28-day cycle, and we're almost 4 different people depending on the week, and where our estrogen and progesterone and other stress hormones are falling, whereas men have got that 24-hour clock of testosterone being produced, meaning that for women especially, they say, which is why women are 32% more likely to experience burnout in the workplace. If it's the week before your period, you know what it's like, the week before your menstrual cycle, and you are feeling very tired, but you're still having to push yourself to do the same amount.
Yeah.
Whereas the week after you have your menstrual cycle, you are on fire. You're like, I can get 50 million things done, and you can almost compensate for the energy dip that you had 2 weeks prior. But the workplace doesn't work like that. And we're all sort of forced to fit into this 24-hour working period that has been modeled on men, really, and when their energy cycles are at their peak. So I just find it quite interesting. There's a lot of research going into the children and adolescents, and also women, and also looking at racial disparities, whether there are any racial disparities towards the working day. And I don't know how far that will come to really changing corporate hustle mentality, or just workplaces in general. But sometimes it's just nice to, as an individual, to know that information for yourself.
Yeah. And I thought everything you just said was extremely fascinating. Like, really taking the time to, I mean, there is such a thing as men versus women, and just in terms of the way we respond to the world hormonally, because we have a whole world going on within us. And that's really important. I think if the workplaces would, and I think it's starting to happen, but if really it becomes a culture of outcomes rather than, I see you in your cubicle from this hour to this hour, I think it's much more interesting to see an excellent outcome. The employee is producing something excellent, whether that employee did it from home at the hours that is best for him or her. It doesn't really matter. What is most important is the production of whatever product it is, whether
Right.
it's service or.
Yes.
And same goes for self-employed people. Like, you need to produce, and so what is best for you to produce? It is not how hard you were working during the day. It's all about the outcome, I feel.
Yes, because it can be, I do think traditionally workplaces are quite performative. You know, you'll have maybe middle managers circling the work floor, kind of being like, why is that person on a break? Why is this person, you know, I've seen the person sitting at the desk, so it must mean that they are the most productive person, whereas person A might be able to cram a lot more of their work into a shorter period of time, like especially when you think about neurodiverse individuals, and working shorter hours leads to better productivity, not necessarily working a 8-hour day or 12-hour shift. You know, it can be 6 hours, even 4 hours, that people are able to get a lot of things done. And it's, I think, corporate culture, or just workplace culture in general, needs to recognize that also trait in people, as you said, like look at the outcome rather than this sort of performance of working.
Absolutely. So in that case, like, maybe that can change specific companies and their culture. I'm wondering how people with that type A trait can find, or maybe you can help with just explaining how to navigate or find careers or work environments that are more conducive to their well-being. Is it kind of like, well, I'll let you take the lead, but I almost feel like, would someone want to steer away from, well, I'm going to let you take the lead, because I feel like there needs to be a navigation.
Actually. Yeah, I actually understand what you're saying. And I think it's quite interesting to say, well, if you know that you're prone to these sort of behaviors, potentially you don't want to be in a work environment that is utilizing those traits and almost in a antagonistic way. However, as I said in the beginning, certain people with certain personality traits are just automatically drawn, and they function really well in certain environments. So someone with a type A personality probably can handle quite a bit of responsibility and things thrown at them, and that's actually what makes them productive and feel alive, and that they can make a contribution to the workforce. I genuinely think that what needs to be more at the forefront is actually an understanding of self. And that's where, whether it's working with a you know, a wellness consultant like myself, whether it's working with a life coach, or just in general the workplace advocating for this, is that people recognize these traits in themselves, and they know that they need to create boundaries and what they should be doing to be able to almost mediate the effects of the workplace on themselves. But it's also twofold, because there's only so much resiliency and boundaries that someone can put in place if it's not being supported by higher ups, you know, middle management or the corporations themselves. So I think it's recognizing that as well, and also being an advocate for yourself in the workforce, and knowing that even type D personalities, that's a caring, caregiver personality type, people pleasing. Now that can very much lend itself to being taken advantage of, and maybe, you know, sort of colleagues giving you their work to do, and you sort of feeling like, okay, yeah, I'll do it, not being able to stand up for yourself. So I think if you're cognizant of this, of these personality types in yourself, you probably feel a little bit more empowered to think, actually, let me set proper boundaries and let me make it known that this is what I'm going to accept and this is not what I'm going to accept outside of what is my normal sort of job responsibility. And also feeling confident to say, if this environment is not suiting me, I'm a skilled person. I can not have Stockholm syndrome and stay where I'm being serviced. I can have that confidence to make a move into another working environment.
Thank you. Finally, before I actually ask this one more question that I have,
okay,
if I wanted to seek your services as a wellness consultant, what does that entail? And that's specific to you.
Okay. How would you seek me out? So how would you find me, or just how would
I find you, and what would the service actually be? And then I'm going to ask you the last question because it's interrelated.
Okay, all right. So actually, so obviously I'm a doctor, and what I did during the pandemic when I experienced burnout is I had to take a step back. And because I was hospitalized for 3 days, receiving IVs and all sorts of different things, and sort of lying in the hospital bed, I just had to I had a reckoning, an epiphany, that I was really doing myself a disservice by not putting myself first. And I then made the decision to leave clinical medicine and to focus on other things. So I trained as a life coach, and prior to this, I was also a luxury travel consultant. And so I started to do a lot of research into the therapeutic benefits of traveling, because what I'd noticed is I'm definitely someone who gets my sense of well-being from exploration, and traveling was or is such a phenomenal activity to do, whether it's domestically or internationally, because you almost encounter the whole sphere. You can almost improve the entirety of your well-being, whether it's physical well-being, spiritual well-being, emotional well-being, by taking a trip somewhere and almost having this when we think about fight or flight, literally taking a flight somewhere and having distance from work or whatever's on your mind, and being able to build positive life coping skills, confidence, things like problem solving skills when you're trying to navigate, just exposure to different cultures, learning new languages, and how much that benefited my well-being. So at the moment, I've started the world's first doctor-led travel consultancy that focuses on prescribing travel as medicine for the mind. So it's a concept that I think a lot of people historically have thought about, like, oh, I would just love a doctor to prescribe me a trip. But in actuality, in the medical workforce, there's no other doctor that's necessarily actually has the skill sets to not only say, yes, you need time off, maybe 2 weeks, yes, go away and do something, but actually prescribe a destination that's suitable, and then also prescribe an itinerary that's completely personalized to your holistic needs, your whole person needs at this moment in time. That's addressing things like stress levels, diet, physical activity, and then also what do you want to do therapeutically, or the exploration that you want to do at that destination. So essentially the way that works is combining these really bespoke itineraries with life coaching. And that's where the real transformation happens, because people have an awakening. It's almost like travel is the catalyst, travel therapy. That's the catalyst to get them to that mindset shift and to think about life and work-life balance and detox from technology, and just rebuild that resiliency a little bit. And then we then work on how are you now going to spark introspection across other areas of your life, and how are you going to make changes that are longer lasting to yourself, your personality, and how are you going to take that forward into your workplace or into the home.
That's amazing. That is fascinating. Well done.
Oh, thank you.
And then that actually leads me to that question that we can wrap up with this. Ask, if I was an employer, okay, and all your knowledge around well-being and burnout, and how would you basically navigate me as an employer of several employees? Okay, let's say I'm a CEO of a company,
Right.
To also achieve work-life balance myself, perhaps. Maybe that's how, I mean, that should probably be included in there as well, but also for the employees, like how would you advise me to proceed in the way I handle the office?
Sure. So I think it's about reasonable expectations, and understanding that, you know, a lot of the workforce now, we saw this with the Great Resignation post-pandemic, they are not necessarily looking for a pay packet. They are looking for, because I thought this myself, what's an extra 10K to me if I'm hospitalized or I'm dead because I've overworked and developed, you know, heart conditions, and I dropped dead and I had a stroke because I was stressing over work. What's that money going to do for me? It's about setting reasonable expectations, and then also making the working environment such that it's conducive to employees feeling that they can use up all of their allocated personal time off, actually encouraging people not to just swap their time off with because we used to have this actually in the NHS where you would have a week off, but then you'd see people coming back in to do extra shifts, and actually discouraging that because they need that time to rest and they need that time to step away from the workplace and employees rebuild their their resilience and just complete the stress cycle. I think it's also really important to look at what are employers actually what are they actually picking as incentives and as part of their employee well-being services. It's all well and good having things like meditation apps, but I think having a focus, like myself, we have our corporate well-being service, which is an extended version of the prescribed wellness travel. And we find that the corporations that really use our services, they have a higher retention rate because their employees are saying, okay, wow, my employer is going to pay for me to have this really bespoke consultation. I'm having life coaching as part of it, and I'm getting to have an adventure. This is really exciting. You know, they're actually supporting me in my whole person kind of well-being. So I think it's looking at things in that way and actually just advocating and encouraging employees to look after themselves, encouraging them to actually take a work break and not just making it performative by being like, yes, we encourage lunch breaks, but also prowling to see who's taking a lunch break, who's sitting down, who's working. But as you said, looking at what is the outcome that you want and allowing people that individuality and sense of self-expression to get there. Because we're adults, we'll get there, we'll have an outcome, but you don't need to micromanage how the steps are done. Quite pedantically, allow people to work to the best of their capabilities and they'll get the job done.
A fascinating conversation.
Thank
you so much for joining me. Is there anything that you would like to add? I really feel like I've been enlightened on so many different topics.
Okay.
So I'm so grateful, and I'm so excited for people to hear this episode. And is there anything that you would like to add before we sign off?
Well, I want to say you've been such a gracious host. I've really enjoyed speaking with you this morning, and you have a wonderful way of interviewing. So I felt completely at ease, and I love the intricacy also of your questions. So I think they cover a large spectrum of what I do as a kind of workplace well-being specialist and wellness travel consultant. So yeah, thank you. I'm really looking forward to seeing the episode back.
Yeah, exciting. Thank you again, and have a wonderful